All right, everybody, good morning. I'm here in my garage, my really messy garage. It's embarrassing, but I'm gonna clean it. It's finally spring here in Northwest Indiana. You know, you guys have seen the 76 Trans Am, a couple videos on that. You may have seen this GTR in a couple videos, but now I'm gonna show you my baby, my favorite car that I own and built. We built this car from the ground up, and I'm gonna unveil it to you now. A lot of you know what it is, but first I'm gonna start it up, and then I'm gonna show you what's under this cover. So first I'll get the sound clip, and I'm gonna roll it out so you can see what this is that I'm so proud of. So hang on. All right, now this car is a recreation of a very famous movie car that I've loved since I was a little kid. So a lot of you already have guessed this car, I'm sure, and movie, but let's get it outside. I'm going to show you more of the car and tell you more about the movie and show you what's under the hood of this baby. She's a little dusty, it needs a good wipe down, but this car, I've wanted to build this car since I was probably 12 years old, 13, I don't know. Some of you are gonna start asking questions about this body and some of the options, but just wait before you say anything. Because there was two different movie cars in part one and part two, if you know these films. So don't jump to conclusions just yet. Everyone loves to. You know what I'm talking about. Those of you that know what movie this car is from. A lot of you may have guessed, because the license plate's a dead giveaway. This car is the replica of a very famous horror film car that I wanted since I saw it on the screen in 1988. I made a replica of the Phantasm 2 Hemi Cuda. Not to be mistaken with the Phantasm 1 car. So, the first two films had two different cars. The first movie car was a real 340 Cuda that they dressed up to make it into a 440 six-pack car with the hood emblems. Everyone that knows these films knows that the part one car had fender flares and a sunroof and some custom striping. So the part two car now in Phantasm 2 was supposed to be a Hemi Cuda. They took shaker hood bubble emblems that said Hemi Cuda and stuck them on the rally hood for the film. It's not how the cars were built. Those emblems don't belong on the hood, but this car I wanted to be just like the movie car and exact. So that part two film, they used a Barracuda to build the movie car. So a Barracuda that had a 318 motor, very small, you know, Chrysler motor that was very common in those cars. And They tried to make it into their version of a Hemi Cuda. You never seen under the hood of the car, but it had those emblems on the hood. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm making this car, I'm putting Hemi in it and making it a badass version of that Phantasm 2 car. So back to the fender flares and sunroof. The Phantasm 2 car, the 1988 film car, did not have that aftermarket sunroof or those aftermarket fender flares and 50 series tires. So if you got to watch those films again, go watch them, but that is exactly how they were. There's more details I'll get into later on this car and the movie car, but this thing took over 3 years to build. I had to hunt down parts, and mainly that Hemi fell into my lap. I'll tell the story of that shortly, but this was lots of fun to build. I have had a lot of Mopars and a lot of different cars. I've restored cars, but this one was the special one that I was dying to build since I was a kid. So a lot of time went by before I was able to do it. Too bad it's so dusty right now. Even the car cover puts dust on these things, but check this out. Here is the interior, all brand new. So basically, I wanted to make it like the film car, but I also wanted to keep it looking as much as possible like a stock 1971 Hemi Cuda. Like if they used a Hemi Cuda to build this car for the movie, I wanted to keep everything stock, you know, not, you know, go away from that at all. So the only difference this car has as far as the interior goes and features compared to a stock Cuda for 71 is I put modern gauges in it. So because this car is going to be driven, and I've restored Mopars like I said before. Let's try and turn these on for a second. These are awesome. These are made by Dakota Digital. Watch them light up. Let's see here. Can't see it right now because it's daylight, but those things, let's turn the key off, are super bright LED backlit analog gauges. They're not digital. So turn them on and off. I'll do it later at night when it's back in the garage, but I wanted the gauges to always work and always perform, and it's got a nice tack in it. You can take vintage Cuda gauges, any Mopar or any old car gauges, send them out, have them restored, pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and they still don't work. They still won't work right. You know, if you're lucky they will, but I've seen a lot of guys restore a lot of cars, and most of the time the gauges just, you know, they're sending them back, whatever. So this thing has the modern Dakota digital gauges, Dakota analog gauges I should say, but they look like old school factory gauges, so that's the cool part. This is a real deal old school 426 Hemi. It's a 1969 Hemi motor, not a crate motor. This came out of a car that was crushed, a GTX, 1969 GTX that was crushed years ago. I was going to build the Part 1 car when I got the body for this sucker, and this thing fell in my lap over a phone call with a friend. He called me one day like, I want to sell that old Hemi, and I'm like, okay. And we started talking about it, and he gave me a price that I could not pass up. Next thing I know, I bought the Hemi, and I'm like, that's it. I'm building the Part 2 Phantasm car. And it's pretty screen accurate, right down to the vintage Remington tires. I hunted these tires for between 3 and 4 years. It took me that long to locate a set of these tires. So I wanted this thing to look like it rolled right off the movie screen. What better? And I can't believe I finally found those Remington XT120 tires. That was hands down the hardest part of this car to find when I built this car. Going back to little differences between like the Part 1 Cuda and the Part 2 Barracuda. So when you watch the films back to back, the Part 1 car has chrome mirrors, where the Barracuda has one single black body color mirror. There's no mirror on the other side. The Part 1 car will have road lamps, like the big nice Cuda road lamps, like fog lamps underneath on that lower valance. Barracuda didn't have it, so it's not on the film car in Part 2. There's just little differences that a lot of people wouldn't know, because most people think it's the same car in 1 and 2. And I've been driven insane in Facebook comments during the build of this car. You can build the nicest car in the world, and people just jump on in comments and go, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. And I'm like, no, I didn't. So the big thing is, everyone jumps on freaking out. Well, where's the fender flares? You didn't put the fender flares on it. You know, I'm like, maybe you should watch the film again. But, you know, I was excited to build the Part 1 car and put those fender flares on, but I don't regret anything making the Part 2 car, because this thing it's a pretty badass car. It won some huge awards its first time out. I'm gonna show you footage from the Chicago McCacken show, the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals, where it scored insanely high, winning a Blue Ribbon Award. I think it scored 996 points out of 1,000. I'm gonna have to look it up, but not only did it get the Blue Ribbon, but it won the best modified Plymouth of the whole show. So right out of the gates, it got some good bragging rights. Again, I tried to make this look as much like a stock engine compartment as possible to a 71 Hemi Cuda, with the exception, now there's another huge difference between the film car and a real Hemi Cuda. A real Hemi car would have a shaker bubble, a shaker hood. So it didn't have a rally hood like you see here. There'd be a hole cut in it, a big hole, where the shaker bubble would bounce around, you know, move back and forth. And every purist out there, when I'm building this car, you should put a shaker on it. No, I shouldn't, because then it would be just another Hemi clone. And it wouldn't be the Phantasm 2 car. So, like I said, you can build the car of your dreams, put all this money and time into it, and people are just gonna complain. So those of you out there that are in the middle of your projects or just about finished with them, be ready for the internet goofs and the trolls that, you know, are gonna tell you the way you should have done it. You should have did this. Oh, you know what? You should have put those wheels on instead of those. Oh yeah? Go put them on your Hemi Cuda. All right, enough of that. I'm getting all hot and bothered here. So let's look at this car more in detail. I'm gonna show you some of the restoration and the build, thanks to the Finer Details in Danville, Indiana. They helped me with my first Cuda, getting it to a national show winner. And this one, I wanted this car to be literally perfect. And they got it pretty darn close, I would say. So those guys do incredible work. You've seen some of my videos from the shop down there, and I'm going to show you exactly what went through in building this sucker to get it to this point now. All right, back to the film car. You know, for years, I'd have to watch it on a VHS tape. So you didn't see a lot of details like you can now with high definition quality video like Blu-ray. I started noticing that the tail panel in the film, there's a shot where they're at a hotel and Reggie walks by, and I noticed it was kind of dull. I'm like, if they used a Barracuda's tail panel was body color. So if it was an orange car, this would be shiny orange. Get it? So the black car should have a shiny orange or shiny black tail panel. Now Cudas, a real Cuda, not a Barracuda, this is the higher line of the two, was the Cuda. They'd shoot this with organosol paint, which is a textured black that felt almost like a nice shark skin feel. And they had stainless trim around here. A little thin strip of stainless, I think it's stainless, trim. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense. If it was a Barracuda, why is that dull, you know? So I knew it didn't get the trim on there because it wasn't a Cuda. And through this whole process, I became friends with Don Coscarelli, who is the genius behind the Phantasm franchise. Writer, producer, director, everything. Long story short, I talked to him one day and I'm like, did you guys flat black that tail panel for the film? And he thought about it and he goes, you know what? We did. Because we were trying to make that Barracuda look as much like a Cuda as possible, and we flat blacked it. I'm like, I knew it. So I went and I was able to, we taped it off perfect. The guys at the shop did. I couldn't do it that nice. It'd be a wreck. But anyway, they flat blacked it with a nice trim black and it looks killer. This is easier to clean than the organosol. If this was a numbers matching car, I would have shot it in the correct organosol paint like I've done on others. But this will clean off real nice, and it looks, honestly, it looks great with no tail panel trim. It's one thing only serious Mopar and Cuda guys are going to recognize. They're going to go, wait a minute, there's no tail panel trim on that car. What's going on? So that's the story with the Phantasm 2 tail panel. For those of you that probably never even knew that. A lot of people, I'm sure, didn't even recognize that in the film. The following photos here were taken by my dear friend Jamie Skripek. She is a phenomenal photographer, and we shot these on Halloween. At this point, when you see this car here, it was only on the street one time. And to this day, it's only been on the road twice. So, you know, with COVID happening, all of the big shows were canceled that I was supposed to do. So this year, we're going to get back in the swing of things and take it to some major events. But when you do things like that, after a restoration like this, you got to keep the car looking as perfect as possible. So once I get through some shows, get some brand new rubber on the car, then I'm going to start driving it. A little. Alright, now I'm going to show you what I started with, and you're not going to believe what this car used to look like. But also, I'm going to take you through the steps on what it took to restore, or I should say build, this particular car. For those of you that are interested, I'll show you a lot of the behind the scenes work now. So check it out. Back in 2013, I was at the Mopars at the Strip show in Vegas, competing for the world's ultimate Mopar, and I ran across this beautiful steel Cuda body. Some of you may be aware that 71 Cuda bodies can be very tough to find. Usually they're all rotted out, sitting in a field, you know, for like 10 or 12 grand, or they're finished driving and running nice cars for tens of thousands. So to find an all-steel body can be very, very tough. This body already had some panel replacement done, some floor pan work, and we sat there, did the math for quite a long time, and figured it was all done very right and good, so it was worth the money, and I bought it. While the guys at the shop started doing their magic, I took the 1969 Hemi motor to my engine builder to start his. Since this was a custom build, I took those original Hemi carbs that were worth a small fortune and sold them on eBay. They paid for half of my engine rebuild. Even rebuilt 42-year-old carburetors can be very problematic, so I went with a set of brand new Edelbrocks for the motor. Here you can see that October 1968 casting date on the block for the 1969 Hemi motor. Mendez Motorsports got to work on the block, getting everything ready for the stock rebuild. I didn't want to go crazy with this motor. I want a nice driving car that's very dependable, with some nice power. So, after that, I upgraded to 1971 style valve covers, because the 1969 Hemi valve covers are different. In my opinion, TTI headers are the only way to go, so I scored myself a beautiful set of ceramic coated headers. Back at the shop, the guys were working away. Countless hours have gone into this body. Just because you get an all-steel body, it really doesn't mean much, because the entire thing needs to get worked and worked and worked, especially getting all of those gaps to look perfect. There are so many stages to this that it could be confusing to most people. And in between all of this, we ended up putting some frame connectors to stiffen up this body. I'll show you what they look like next. E-body Mopars don't sit on a frame. There's front and back frame rails. So I went with US Car Tool frame connectors. They're laser cut to the floor pans to fit all the angles and curves perfectly. See the front and back frame rails there? We're going to connect those now by welding these in place. These should stiffen up that car for that Hemi. There's also torque boxes as well that went on this car. We then had to weld in a 4-speed hump since this car was an automatic and I gotta have a stick. The motor was prepped and painted the correct Hemi orange color. Then it started getting dressed with all its necessities. Carburetors look awesome on there. The body has gone through so many stages at this point. Now it's getting ready for primer. But not the final primer. Now it goes through more work to get that body line laser straight. That body line that's down the center of the car has to look sharp and perfect. Notice those door gaps. Everything is beautiful at this point. After countless hours of blocking, the car's getting ready for its sealer and paint. So it's almost there, ready to be shot in single stage black. Not base clear. I decided to shoot this car in single stage for a couple of different reasons. One, it'll give it more of an old school look. And number two, there should be a lot less swirling going on that you see with clear coat. It's just a little easier to keep up and keeping it looking nice and black. And it's going to be a super rich deep black with single stage. I can't tell you how excited I was when I saw the color on the car. When these guys paint, they paint incredibly like I wanted a show finish, and that's what I got. Wait till this thing is wet sanded and buffed. The car was taped off and the factory undercoating patterns was done behind the inner aprons, and then the entire bottom of the car was undercoated. We used a little different undercoating than factory undercoating. It's a little finer and easier to clean. Then we used a thicker version in the tops of the fenders in case any rocks get kicked up. We did some serious layers up there. Dave started working his magic. There were 5 coats of single stage DuPont on this car. His wet sanding and buffing just made this thing come alive. Wait until you see this finish. Alright, back home. Like, I need to do something, right? I can't just sit back and let the guys do all the work. Although when it comes to body and paint, I want the car perfect. So now I'm going to restore this nasty old dash. I've become pretty good at component restoration over the years. So now I'm taking this dash down to its bare frame, blasting it, and painting it trim black and getting it ready to install all of the new parts. Since this car is pretty special to me, I started replacing the worn out heater control panels and radio bezels with brand new versions. I was switching the car from a standard dash to a rally dash, but the housing I scored was pretty scratched up, and this cannot go in the car looking like this. I took really fine sandpaper and started sanding all of these areas, the flat areas. Then I used plastic filler to fill in any big scratches and then kept sanding it all down. I then used the SEM paint I used for plastics and dusted it until it looked like a nice brand new plastic finish. Did the same thing with the switch panel. That corner switch panel looked terrible, but check it out when I finish it. Before and after. I then got the new Dakota Digital analog gauge cluster for rally cars. They make these amazing brand new clusters that drop right into an original Cuda or Challenger rally dash gauge bezel. It fits like a glove. So for $9.95, you get all brand new gauges that work perfectly. That was way too much work. Time for a break. I went on a quest to meet the tall man himself, Angus Scrim. The late great Angus signed all my goods that I brought with me and my glove box for the car. I went on to meet the rest of the cast and had them all sign the glove box door because I was going to install it in the Cuda. I then continued to restore the rest of the dash components. I bought a few more pieces for the dash, then I went on to restore the steering column. Luckily, I've done some Cuda steering columns in the past, so this time it was much easier than my first go around. When I was done, it was all brand new inside and out. All new harnesses, switches, correct paint finishes. It looked great. After the K-frame got back from being converted into a Hemi K-frame, it was then painted the correct finish. The motor was then installed, and we started putting the restored suspension components all in place. Notice that real cosmoline on those control arms. Every time you glance over at a table, it seems to never stop being loaded with parts. So now the motor's going together with the transmission, and it is looking so cool. I can't wait to get it into the car. Before that, all of the brake lines and fuel lines are installed into the car, front to back. A major restoration facility checks and rechecks again everything. That's why you'll see little notes everywhere on parts of the car, making sure when this thing is finished, everything is perfect and nothing was forgotten. My 354 Dana rear end was prepped, repainted, got the brake lines installed, the strange axles all in place, and then that went and was installed into the car. One of the most exciting days of the whole ordeal was putting that Hemi in the car. Lifting him up like this is pretty much the best way to do it, in my opinion. Everybody that has a Mopar will probably agree. We had the motor in like 15 minutes. We had it all bolted in place. The K-frame went right in, lowered the car down, and it fit perfect. Started looking at those tires next to the car, getting very excited. Now it's looking like a Cuda. The paint was just drawing me in. I couldn't stop staring at this thing. Alright, I restored a few more components, and then I sent my wiper motor, the original, to Topher McGinnis. He is the best I've ever seen. I'm going to put his name on the screen. Don't mess around. Send it to Topher and be done. I think a lot of you are realizing just what it takes to restore cars like this and why it can be so expensive now. It is literally crazy how many things you have to buy, how many components need to be restored or replaced before they go back on that newly painted car. Every single thing must be gone through, replaced, or restored. That is, if you want to do it right. I was laughing at someone making fun of my last video on the Trans Am where I called myself a perfectionist.
Now you're learning that I pretty much am. And this is just a custom build. This isn't like a numbers matching car. If I'm building something special, I really take a lot of pride in it. I want it to be the best that I can make it within my budget. When I first met Don Coscarelli in person, I'm like, hey, I'm going to build one of the movie cars. And he's probably heard that a million times. He's like, oh, that's nice. And I go, no, listen to me. I'm really going to do like a spectacular high-end version of one of the film cars. And I had a copy of Mopar Collector's Guide with me that had my other blue Cuda on the cover. It was a big feature. When I showed him that, he's like, sit down, let's talk. And he couldn't believe to the extent of how I restore these cars. And we exchanged personal emails, and he was along for the entire ride on this build. Back to the restoration of the dash and all the components. I just painted those little yellow and blue arrows inside the switches and the white little circle in the headlamp switch. The nice wood grain panels were available to purchase new aftermarket, and they look spectacular. Now, see these little black buttons? Those are controls for the decoded digital gauge system. There's all kinds of cool functions that those gauges have, so you have to drill and mount these little buttons. You could either do that or have a little toggle under the dash, but this looks nice and clean, and it's right there on the front. Those control features that will pop up in those little digital displays, those LCD displays. Now you can see the brand new newly restored original dash pad. I've got that on top of there now, and it's looking like a complete dash again. You can see compared to the old one here, it's like night and day. And this is such a great feeling when you get to that point after restoring something like this, because it's a lot of work, lots of little details and components going into these dashes. If any of you are out there getting ready to restore a dash, I highly recommend not buying aftermarket dash pads with plastic bodies. Get an original, have it restored. It has a metal frame. Those plastic ones can end up warping when sitting in the sun when your car's all finished. And they just fit like crap. So always go original if you can. Send it out, have it refinished and restored. And yet another component that needs restoration is the heater box under the dash. Heater box holds the blower motor, heater core, controls your heat, air going into the car. To restore them can be a big pain in the butt. It's not impossible. The guys though did a killer job, so I didn't have to do it. It came out great. The parking brake is yet another piece that needs to be restored. Look at what they look like when they come out of a car. It's not rusty, it's just like dry surface rust, but I blasted it down. I restored this one by myself. Came out great. You can send them out and they come back looking just like this. Anyway, you can buy the pieces you need to make them new again, but refinishing them in the correct colors really helps if you want to do it right. This one came out super nice, I must say. The sound deadener is all in place. Then you can see the heater boxes installed, the under dash insulation, the emergency brake I just restored is in there, and those pedals, the restored pedal box, meaning clutch, brake pedal, the gas pedals going in. So getting ready for the interior. Alright, welcome to the wonderful world of restoring cars. Years ago, I ordered a tank. It's been in the box this whole time. It was a crappy, lame version with no galvanized finish. So make sure you order the Spectra tanks. I believe they're Spectra if you want the correct galvanized look, because the other ones will start rusting from the inside. Don't buy a cheap fuel tank. The new drive shaft is in place. Things are starting to get buttoned up underneath. It's looking really good. All the new suspension looks beautiful. It's starting to look like a show car. Going back to the movie car details, the movie car was a Barracuda, so it had turned down exhaust pipes. Normally, Cudas have nice cutout holes coming through the rear valance, so that exhaust, the tips go straight out the back of the car. These, however, are turned down to the ground like you can see here. Just another detail I wanted to have just like the film car. Some California cars had this option as well, but mostly Cudas all had it coming out the back. And once again I went with a whole TTI exhaust system that fit like a glove. Purists gave me hell on this, and I don't care. I love the turn down pipes, and they sound amazing. If you think we're almost done, guess again. We have to restore the wiper arms and get new wiper blades put on. And don't forget to send out the alternator to make it look brand new. Get it all rebuilt so it's new and make it look good. Then there's the taillight housings. I'm getting new lenses, new chrome bezels, new gaskets to make the taillights look absolutely perfect and brand new before they go back in that car. Now the 71 Cuda vent tube for the gas tank needs to be re-tinned. The tin finish is worn off. So I've got a place in Chicago that does this. If you guys ever need this done, send it to this place I'm going to show you next. You can send your whole fuel tank to Archer Tinning and Retinning. They will retin the whole thing. And just as you think you're getting closer, you glance over at this table, loaded with all kinds of little stuff that has to go on that car. Alright, one little detail I cannot forget to mention is my custom fender tag. All Mopars had a fender tag, I think after 1968 maybe, that has all the codes for the car, like the VIN number, special codes about the options. So since this was a custom build, I decided to have a custom fender tag made, and I put some cool information on there that fans of the film will definitely like, so check it out. I had all new glass installed, and all the nice polished stainless trim went back on the car. Jumping back to movie car details, there's only a couple of tiny parts in this movie where you can tell what kind of steering wheel is on the car. And you actually see the back of the steering wheel. That's how I was able to tell it was supposed to get the old standard Cuda, horn pad like this. It didn't get the cool tough wheel or anything. It just has the old standard basic Barracuda horn pad and center. And it makes sense because they used a Barracuda for the film. But you know what? I love the look of it, and I'm not changing it. I'm blabbing so much I almost forgot to show you the restored trunk. Here's the correct Space Saver tire with its inflator and the proper jack, all in place. After the Muscle Car Nationals were over, we finally brought the car to my house after I made some room.
Holy shit, it's home. First time it's ever even been here at this house. Crazy. What a weird feeling.
So next, I get a special invite to bring the car to the Chicago World of Wheels. I was so excited to be in a show with so many iconic cars that I have loved my entire life. This is one of the show of shows. Truly amazing stuff everywhere. So I went out of my way to build a really cool display for the car. Something that reminded me of all the World of Wheels events I would go to in the 80s with my dad. All of the cars had these cool displays, so I wanted to make mine look kind of spooky to match the theme of the car. So I made all of these custom stanchions to look like cemetery pillars, and then I put chains around it and did my own version of what I used to like as a kid when I'd go to these shows. The show was extraordinary. I literally had the red carpet treatment, rolled out to me, and it was amazing. However, this show left a serious bad taste in my mouth. Like any show I've done over the past, and I've done lots of major car events, at the end of the night, I close my hood, shut the doors, and I go home. So, not knowing any of the rules for judging, I come in the next morning on Saturday, and my friend that helped get the invite for me to the show told me I was disqualified. They disqualified me from judging because I closed my hood. I said, "You mean you can't go to me in the morning before the show starts and say, 'Hey, pop your hood so we can judge it'?" Nope. all of that work, getting the car there, setting it up, trailering it, out the window. He's like, you would have won it. You would have won it all. I'm like, yep. Anyway, will I ever do that show again? Very doubtful. Here's the funny thing. This is in the exact same room that the Muscle Car Nationals was in. So about 50 feet away. That's where I won the Blue Ribbon Award and the best modified Plymouth of the whole show. Why do I close the hood and lock up the car at shows like that, where it's sitting by itself all night? Well, it's good practice because people have started to walk off with Hemi and six-pack air cleaners. At the Mopar Nationals, it's happened. So, somebody walks off with that whole air cleaner base setup, it's a couple $1,000 gone. So that's why it's always good practice to shut the damn hood. But, lesson learned. Magazine debut was in Chrysler Power last year, and in about a month or so it's going to be on the cover of another major Mopar magazine, so definitely watch for it. There's a great story along with it. Another exciting moment with the car is when the beautiful Courtney Hansen fell absolutely in love with it. She was crazy about it. She started sitting in it, taking selfies with the car. She had me take pictures of her next to it, and then she started posting it on her Instagram a few times. So I could tell she absolutely loved the car, which was really cool. Thanks, Courtney. Back to the real movie car. Not many people know this, but it just made a recent appearance back on the big screen. That old Part 2 car was featured in Don Coscarelli's latest film, Phantasm Ravager, Part 5 in the Phantasm series. And this, my friends, is where I figured something out that I never knew about the old car. The old Part 2 car also has pinstriping down the side. This is something I never knew, and I've watched these movies countless times. At first I thought maybe he added it for the new film, until I found this old picture in my garage where Angus is standing in front of the car, and sure enough, there it is. You can see it running down the fender and the door. I couldn't believe it. So I started watching it on Blu-ray, and you can just see little hints of it in Part 2 on a Blu-ray disc. If you know where to look for it, you will see it. That's crazy. So, that's one last detail I have to add to this car. With 2020 and COVID and all that, I just didn't get it done. So, at least I have something to look forward to on finishing this car up now. So, pretty much all that was done to this car from the old Part 2 film to the new film is they took the Hemi Cuda badges off the hood. There's actually photos where you can see the empty holes where the emblems were removed. And midway through filming, they actually switched from the old Remington tires to new BF Goodrich radial TAs. I actually spotted in the film where you can actually see both different sets of tires on the car, because that film, I think it took them like 5 years to complete it or something like that. So midway through filming, they ended up putting new tires on the car. I thought it was pretty funny how you could still see the Remingtons in one scene and then the BF Goodrich in another. Thank you to all of you that stuck it out to the very end of this long video and hearing about my quest to build the Phantasm 2 car and all the details I'm able to tell you about the original movie car compared to mine. So thanks again. I appreciate you watching, and give it a like, and please follow the channel.